Hi, I'm Péter Krekó, Director of Political Capital Institute, and please listen to Visegrad Insight podcast because it's a fantastic platform.
Welcome to the Visegrad Insight podcast.
We bring you global experts on the future of democracy, security, and economy.
The leading voices from Central Europe and on Central Europe.
Hosted by editors of Visegrad Insight.
Powered by Republika Foundation from Warsaw, Poland. Well, hello again. It's Monday, 22nd of June, 2026, when we record this podcast, and I have a special guest with us. We're really connected between Warsaw and Budapest, Poland and Hungary. Péter Krekó, Political Capital, welcome.
Hi, Wojtek. Thanks for having me.
And my name is Przybylski. I am editor-in-chief of Visegrad Insight, and we record this podcast on a very special day, just a day before Visegrad Group seems to be politically revived. There is a upcoming meeting tomorrow in Hungary, where Péter Magyar is inviting the other three leaders. It has not been happening for about 4 years under the previous Prime Minister of Hungary. And now the Visegrad Group seems to be all of a sudden, and to a surprise to many, being revived. Let me just give you a couple of quotes that I found online. And we know that, for instance, Donald Tusk said that the Visegrad Group may regain its vitality and its influence within the European Union. I am personally ready for us to expand this Visegrad cooperation. Sorry, that was Péter Magyar actually saying that he wants to expand the Visegrad cooperation. And then Donald Tusk said that he has waited for this for years. He has waited for this moment for years, and he wants to sit at one table with a Hungarian, a Slovak, and a Czech and talk about what we can do together for our nations. Then another one, Hungary and Poland, specifically naming the two, will act as one fest in Brussels and in geopolitical matters. So this is about unity and being strong together. Make V4 great again. That's really something that we have read in the early June from the preparations and how Donald Tusk has been talking about the V4, obviously playing on the tones of by now very popular "Make America Great Again, Make Europe Great Again," but now make V4 really great again. How great Visegrad is to Hungarian political scientists and political analysts like yourself. Are you still a Visegrad fan, Peter?
Yeah, first of all, thanks again for having me. And it's indeed a very important time. And I don't want to be very pathetic, but also I do think really a bit of elevating time when it comes to discussing Visegrad relations, but also bilateral relations between Poland and Hungary that I think really do face, hopefully a period of strong development and maybe more serious cooperation than it has been. Honestly, I have always been a big fan of the Visegrad cooperation. On the other hand, I have always been a bit of skeptical about the Visegrad cooperation as a very substantial and deep cooperation like the Nordic initiatives or the Baltic initiatives in terms of putting these countries on the same platform when it comes to joint interest in terms of security. But I think also a bit when it comes to economy. I mean, these countries are competitors of each other and to a bit also in terms of geopolitical orientation. I think the good sign from Budapest currently is that while the government really emphasized how important the Visegrad cooperation is, also the direction seems to be making it a loose cooperation based on actual issues and on joint projects and initiatives instead of making it like an anti-Brussels platform than in some periods of the Visegrad cooperation under Viktor Orban it have become. So it's not against something, but it's more in favor of something. And if we talk about the regional policies of the new government, we also have to mention that Austria is also in the spotlight of attention from the new foreign policy. So the best and most accurate probably is to talk about the V4 plus Austria cooperation as the most important, regional foreign policy goal of the government. And if we have to pick one country at this moment on which is the most important for Hungarian foreign policy purposes, it's definitely Poland. And we have just to remind ourselves that Péter Magyar, similarly to Viktor Orban back to 2010, when he came back to power, had his first bilateral visit to Poland and met with Donald Tusk. So if we talk about Visegrád, it's important in itself, but we can discuss bilateral relations between Poland and Hungary separately as well, because it's probably above the Visegrád when it comes to its real relevance and importance.
So wait a second, Peter, because we have the policy issues about Brussels, specific interest, then certain projects that might have a bilateral, multilateral format across Central Europe, and we certainly can focus on that. We have this claim that I started with the quote that I misattributed to Donald Tusk, but of course it was Péter Magyar who said Visegrad, great, and let's invite even others. He's thinking about, Visegrad 4 plus 4 more. So there is a very specific Hungarian angle with this. But before we unpack all of this, I wanted to ask you this specific question where I think I have to say I disagree that you said that there are various geopolitical or strategic positions, and there are differences between the countries. Now I'll put my Polish hat. If you haven't seen it, it's on me already, but I have to emphasize this, that I'm speaking from the Polish perspective. The very fact that we have a green light in Warsaw for Visegrad cooperation, after Warsaw has signaled very strongly that it's looking to the north and it's looking to the west, but it's forgetting Central Eastern Europe, anything to the south. It was specifically on the grounds of strategy and the misperception or misalignment, strategic misalignment on the very question of Russia, Ukraine, more broadly of the threat perception. We don't need to use the big G word to describe it, but in many ways this is Poland saying, oh, now we are back in the game of doing some pragmatic business. Okay, don't look at Poland these days because we're having a memory politics fight between Warsaw and Budapest. Yeah, but this is not Donald Tusk. This is President Nawrocki. And since we have a very kind of return to, let's say, principled foreign policy that is driven by security interest, we recognize they're similar. Of course, there are some nuances. There is geographical location, which is different, to say the least. But we agree together who's the enemy, who's the friend, and that puts us all together. Now, how important do you believe, from the Budapest perspective, this return of alignment on common security foreign policy in EU terms is for revival of the V4, or it is not as emphasized in the perspective, in the mindset of Hungarian politics today?
No, don't get me wrong. I think it is extremely important. And yes, there is a break in foreign policy in Hungary, period. Which means that one of the last speeches that Viktor Orban have made before he was defeated on the election is that we should not treat Russia as a threat, and it's very cheap to talk about Russia as some kind of ultimate threat to Hungary, because it's more Brussels that poses an existential challenge for Hungary as a sovereign nation state. And I'm just quoting it to illustrate how far Orban went in the pro-Russian policies that Péter Magyar and his government does not want to continue on. And there has been some substantial steps taken in order to improve the relationship with Ukraine. There was a planned bilateral meeting that have not materialized yet between Zelensky and Péter Magyar, but hopefully it will happen soon. And even if there are going to be remaining tensions with Ukraine, I think around the rights of ethnic Hungarians in Transcarpathia and maybe the quick EU accession as well. Generally, Poland and Hungary is way closer right now in terms of foreign policy than they used to be. And yes, I think the perception of the enemy is pretty similar. Yeah, and the perception of friends, I think, are indeed pretty similar, even if I think Hungary will not become this very strongly pro-Ukrainian country that Poland, I think, traditionally has become, despite all the historical antagonisms that right now poison the bilateral relationship between Warsaw and Kiev, and also will not become similar than, let's say, the Baltic countries. What did I mean when I was talking about the different geopolitical interest? When it comes, for example, to the attention of Poland and Hungary to non-EU member states, typically Hungary's focus is on the Western Balkans, while Poland's focus is much more on Eastern Partnership countries. Correct me if I'm wrong, but
I think I agree with this. Yeah.
And it also means I think that there is a bit of different perception of regional affairs, and also maybe a bit of different perception from that angle as well on which direction the European Union have to focus most if it wants to step further in the enlargement process. But when we take a look at the big picture, I would definitely agree that there are much more similarities between Poland and Hungary about the major issues, that the European Union is an alliance that we are proud members of, that Ukraine deserves help, and Russia is the aggressor. And also one more point on the general Visegrád platform, I do think that Slovakia and I think Czech Republic is a more exciting and maybe more complex case. But when it comes to Slovakia per se, I definitely think that there is a different threat perception of Russia. For example, of Robert Fico, who have also visited the victory parade of Vladimir Putin. So I think that the biggest divisive issue has been, I think, in the last more than a decade practically, was Russia and Ukraine. And I do think it remains as a very divisive issue within the Visegrad cooperation. What I'm hopeful about, though, is that when Viktor Orban was defeated on the election, I think it have also probably sent a chilling signal for pro-Russian politicians and illiberal politicians, not only in Central Eastern Europe, but overall Europe, that if you put your political future on the help and support of Vladimir Putin, then maybe your future is a bit uncertain. So it's not a very stable foundation. First. Second, that European intelligence services are very attentive to the dangerous ties of EU member states and the Russian Federation. And maybe if you do not want before the next election that this your shady ties with Russia are becoming public, then maybe it's better to support more the EU mainstream lines. So what I would like to suggest is that I think both for Slovakia and maybe also for the Czech Republic as well, the outlierism from the European Union and this, loud pro-Russian rhetoric is maybe something that they also see that does not pay off, and it might put the Visegrad cooperation back on a more pragmatic track when Ukraine and Russia maybe will be less divisive issue than previously. And unlike Hungary, Czech Republic and Slovakia were much less having an appetite for obstruction and vetoism when it came to Russia and Ukraine related decisions.
Yeah, but I think exactly on that point, on the future EU accession, we have not only a positive alignment, we no longer have Russians in the room, although there is Fico. Ooh, so, we've seen that. We have seen that clip. It went viral when Donald Tusk was, on the sidelines of the meeting in Cyprus. He was being patted by Robert Fico, and then they were making gestures. It's definitely worth seeing. You cannot unsee it once you do. So that's in terms of advertisement of the skill set for the presser. For the Polish Prime Minister, but also for Mr. Fico, who immediately after tweeted, that was a week after, that three musketeers, and there is a selfie taken by Babiš and Tusk and Fico, three musketeers are waiting for the fourth one. We have written also about that in the Visegrad Insight before I've provided the analysis. We have the full quote also of the first comeback of Visegrad topic to Donald Tusk lines when he gave an interview on the board of the plane when he was coming from Yerevan, from the European political community, and it's all there. I think that the recent developments also speak volume about the attitude towards Ukraine, and I think you mentioned that there is let's agree that there is a geographical alignment. This is quite natural, and you can call it political also at the same time, because Hungary has very particular interest in building up relationship to many of its neighbors, also because of the Hungarian diaspora that is very strong, and it's in the traditions of the long-term foreign policy of Hungary to pay special attention to these countries with whom Hungary needs to build relationship for the sake of preserving maintaining the cultural ties and the national obligations to ethnic Hungarians and the nationals of Hungary abroad. And in that sense, I have a question to you in a moment to follow up on why only Austria is the country that you believe will be so important in the V4 cooperation. Péter Magyar was promising 4 more next to V4. So which are the other 3 if Austria is one of them? But before you answer, I wanted to mention that we already have also alignment regarding Ukraine that is not about fast-tracking Ukraine accession. There is, in fact, a very promising and a very positive progress in terms of unlocking the first cluster of negotiations on enlargement that includes Ukraine and Moldova. But the very same week, Péter Magyar said, well, basically, there is not going to be any fast tracking. And it is a common position of Budapest and Warsaw, and not for reasons about historical memory. It is very much about some strategic interests related to agriculture, to logistics, transportation, kind of nitty-gritty of European integration, if you wanted. But these countries are, as direct neighbors, particularly interested in leveraging their position in terms of the final package, and Ukraine alignment in these policies, not to get a free pass, so to say, and to put our sectors of our economy in a disadvantageous position. And I think what aligns Budapest and Warsaw in this respect is also how Bratislava sees that. Because again, it's a neighboring country. It also is looking at different sectors of Ukraine with potential, at least let's call it a question mark about where is this Slovak competitiveness coming in when Ukraine is fully integrated in all the domains, in respect also to positioning on EU policies. Short term, there is absolute agreement that Ukraine must survive, must stand unified. the question of its future membership is already starting to be a more kind of it's a way up the ladder, and it takes time and it takes effort, and we start, I think, seeing that Visegrad might be positioning on how to coordinate on this, not necessarily on fast tracking, but on seeing that this most significant country to join the EU, at least in the Eastern Europe, in the coming years, and I'm sure, and I'm fingers crossed for that, is going to be also a major policy challenge for the other V4 countries, at least for the 3 countries in the Visegrad Group that border directly with Ukraine.
Hi, if you're enjoying this episode, why not subscribe to Visegrad Insight? This gives you access to all our latest content online, as well as to our live and online events. You can use our special promo code for Visegrad Insight podcast listeners to get 35% off. Just go to visegradinsight.eu, choose a yearly subscription, and apply code Visegrad35. And now, back to the podcast.
Now, let me ask you, Peter, about the other 3 countries of Péter Magyar dream of V4, of the next V4, so to say. You mentioned Austria, and there is a traditional, historical affinity. This is also that's a country to relate in many positive ways for Budapest. It is quite natural. Poland, by the way, is also, building great relations. Vienna is investing in the so-called Slavkov Triangle. It's trying to have Czechia and Slovakia. In a way, it's quite natural. Budapest wants to be part of it, and it wants to use Visegrad leverage. And Austrians always had a bit of an awkward feeling about Visegrad. I remember that once I received a letter from Ambassador of Austria protesting that we write something critical about Austria in a Visegrad Insight because we should stick to Visegrad only, and we should leave Austria out of it. That was the beginnings of Visegrad Insight in our case. But by now I think Visegrad is something else. It's something that others like Austria sees a value in terms of doing European policy. Again, the question is to you. What about the other 3? If Péter Magyar said there should be 4 more countries as part of the gang, which one?
I have to admit, I'm not sure I can mind read well Péter Magyar himself, and picking up on a few statements that they have done. I'm just guessing, and I might be wrong, but I think Romania might be a country where I think the goal is also, I think, improving the relations big time, and I think it would be definitely something that would serve also the interests of the ethnic Hungarian communities in Transylvania. So I think Romania might be a country where Hungary wants to strengthen ties as well. And I would just bring back some memories about when Viktor Orbán came back to power in 2010 again. He had an ambitious plan of revitalizing an axis within Central and Eastern Europe. And this is Romania, Hungary, and Poland, which, Hungary is the smallest country among those, but I think given the proximity of Hungary to Romania, I think it would be also quite logical to strengthen ties somehow, which I would say that the bilateral relations were absolutely not always terrible in the last decades, but it had its ups and downs. But of course, historical antagonism definitely plays a role, and I think it becomes always a bit more important during the summer when the Hungarian right and Fidesz has its annual meeting in Transylvania, which is typically followed by some bitter remarks from Romanian politicians. I think Romania is definitely important. Slovenia is, even if small, and it's, I think in terms of identity, it's more of a Western country than a Central and Eastern European, or let's say a Western Balkans country, but it could also be important. Which else? I'm not entirely sure.
Croatia, maybe?
Croatia might be where, and with Croatia, I think Hungary has traditionally, rather good relationship, but there has been some recent bilateral tensions revived there as well, especially when it comes to gas pipelines and energy transfer and energy supply. So the good thing and what helps, I think, the new government in Hungary is that Viktor Orbán's government have deteriorated the relationship with almost all neighbors. I think Slovakia is maybe an exception, but it's and Serbia is also an important exception. But generally, with most of the countries, especially with EU member states, the relationship went so wrong, and also in the broader region, that it will be easy to improve. And I think, given that there is a good expectation from most of the member states that there will be a more cooperative country that does not necessarily use this, I think when it comes to foreign policy rhetoric, under the foreign ministership of Péter Magyar, I think Hungary just exported the bitter and sometimes very aggressive domestic political rhetoric to foreign policy, and I think it in itself did not really help to improve relations. And when it comes to Croatia, for example, that you mentioned, I think the bilateral relations really improved or deteriorated a lot, partially because of this tone of diplomacy. So it will be easier to improve, but also this V4 plus 4 countries that you mentioned. I think it's also an important refocusing of foreign policy. Viktor Orbán, especially in his last years, focused increasingly on improving global relationship with United States, with China, with India, with countries in Latin America, in Africa, and practically everywhere in the world. And first of all, not all of these relationships seem to pay off quite a lot, especially when it comes to common interests. But second, I don't think a small country like Hungary can do real global foreign policy. And also, I think one important reason for the fall of Viktor Orbán is that he overplayed foreign policy. If you are a leader of a country of 10 million, but you want to constantly be a global player, then you have to invest so much in foreign policy, in terms of money, in terms of attention, and so on, that it drives away your attention first from the region, second from your own electorate and voters. And maybe I think it's a more realistic ambition to have a strong regional focus in foreign policy, and let's strengthen the ties with countries that are close to us and with whom we anyway have a rather important economic and political ties already. So in that sense, the increasing regional focus of Hungarian foreign policy, I think, is more than just pure rhetoric. I think it's something that we will also see to materialize, which of course does not mean mean that Péter Magyar does not want to improve relationship with Germany, with France, and so on and so on. But I think more attention to the regional partners and friends of Hungary. It is definitely a shift that I think comes from a realistic assessment of Hungary's capacities as a small state in terms of doing foreign policy.
Yeah, and there comes also the political party alignment, and a number of these countries have a strong, basically party alignment within the European game of political groupings, and the EPP now that it is dominant both in Warsaw and Budapest, but also Slovenia. And to some extent, there are hopes for alignment with similar-minded groups on the liberal, on the more far or the further right of EPP. That is something that is materializing as also trying to find a new mainstream in the European politics, and I think that comes very handy. But I suggest, because we're approaching the time limit also of our podcast, that we take this topic and also we look into the do's and don'ts of the democratic revolution 2.0 to another podcast episode, because I think both of us had at least appetite to discuss it as we met not so long ago at the sidelines of the Europe Futures initiative, and we wanted to get deeper into that, and I think hopefully our listeners will also appreciate the second part when we record it. What say you, Peter?
Yeah, I would be glad to continue the conversation. I definitely think that Poland and Hungary has a lot in common when it comes to this regime change, or half regime change, and with the ambivalent experiences of de-democratization and then re-democratization. So this is probably something to discuss in a next episode, and I definitely think that Hungary can learn from some of the good and bad experiences in Poland as well on how to go along on this track. The president will be removed very soon in Hungary. The constitutional court will be rescheduled, and there are a lot more institutional changes in the pipeline. So I'm glad to discuss it further.
We should discuss. And from the Polish perspective, at least if I can tell for the current government, there will be a lot of envy in terms of the political toolbox that Budapest now has in possession. Let's see how the results go and what are the strategies behind it. Peter, thank you so much for joining this podcast episode. I hope we reconnect soon enough, because the other topic is equally hot. Right now there is about 30 degrees in Warsaw. I guess it's 35 or something in Budapest. Thank you for the discussion and for keeping up with us and our listeners despite the summertime conditions. We should do it before the real heat hits us big time. Péter Krekó, Political Capital.
Thanks a lot for the opportunity, Wojciech. And see you next time.
Until next time, this is Wojciech Przybylski, Visegrad Insight. Thank you for listening. And that's all from this week's episode of the Visegrad Insight podcast, bringing you the leading voices from Central Europe and on Central Europe.
Make sure to subscribe, and we'll be in touch next week.